You know what's funny about space? Everyone thinks it's all sleek uniforms, dramatic command decisions, and heroic space battles. Well, let me tell you something. Most of us up here spend our days crawling through maintenance tubes, fixing broken recyclers, and trying not to float face first into someone else's lunch in the zero-G sections. Real glamorous stuff. The name's Zack Thorne, and I'm what they politely call a station infrastructure maintenance specialist on Outpost Delta 9. In reality, I'm the guy they call when the waste management system backs up, or when someone's pet hamster chews through a wire conduit again. Thorne, we've got another situation in Section 7, Supervisor Chen's voice crackled through my comm unit. Her tone carried that special mix of exasperation and amusement that I'd grown used to over the past 3 years. Let me guess, I replied, already reaching for my multi-tool. Lieutenant Morris tried to upgrade his quarters' environmental controls again. Close, he attempted to boost his shower pressure. Now there's a miniature rainforest growing in the corridor. I couldn't help but laugh. That man's determination to have an Earth-standard shower is going to get him spaced one of these days. I pushed off from the wall, letting momentum carry me through the station's service tunnel. On my way, life on Delta 9 had a certain rhythm to it. Wake up, fix something, eat protein paste masquerading as breakfast, fix something else, dodge the weekly supply drone's automated loading arms, fix 3 more things, sleep. Repeat until retirement or insanity, whichever comes first. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering and questionable budget decisions. Shaped like a massive wheel with spokes connecting to a central hub, it spun just fast enough to create artificial gravity in the outer ring where most of us lived. The center stayed at 0G, perfect for research labs and storage, and for giving the newbies space sickness. I'd just finished dealing with Morris's indoor jungle when my datapad started screaming. Not the usual someone spilled coffee on a console alarm, but the deep, pulsing tone reserved for serious system anomalies. Control, are you seeing this? I tapped through the readouts, frowning at the energy signatures dancing across my screen. Getting some weird fluctuations in the long-range sensor grid. Confirmed, Thorne. Controller Patel's voice was tight. We're picking up... Wait, that can't be right. The signal pattern doesn't match anything in our database. Of course it doesn't, I muttered, already heading for the nearest access panel, because having a normal day where things just work would be too much to ask. The signal kept getting stronger. It wasn't like the usual background noise we got from passing ships or space debris. This was different, a complex pattern that made my teeth itch just looking at the wavelength analysis. Thorne, Patel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We're classifying this as a potential first contact scenario. Stay where you are until security can... The rest of his warning was drowned out by a massive burst of static. My datapad went crazy, numbers and symbols scrolling faster than I could read. Through the nearest viewport, I caught a glimpse of something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there, a streak of purple light cutting across the stars. Well, I said to no one in particular, looks like today's maintenance schedule just got a lot more interesting. And that's when the real trouble started. The purple streak turned out to be some kind of ship, if you could call it that. The thing looked more like a massive crystal that someone had stuck engines on. It was trailing what appeared to be space dust, but my sensors told me it was actually crystalline debris. Someone had taken a few good shots at this beauty. Control, I'm at Junction 42B. That ship's going to crash right into our cargo bay if someone doesn't do something fast. I was already moving, using the maintenance corridors like my personal highway system. Please tell me the defense grid is online. Negative, Patel responded, sounding like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The energy signature is... It's confusing our systems. We can't get a lock. Fantastic, just fantastic. I reached the cargo bay doors just as emergency protocols kicked in. Red warning lights painted everything in an apocalyptic glow. I'm going to try something stupid. Thorne, don't you dare. I overrode the safety protocols on the cargo bay doors. The ship was small enough to fit, barely. If I timed this right, the bay's magnetic field would catch it. If I got it wrong, well, we'd have a new skylight. The crystal ship tumbled through the opening like a drunk dancer, scattering rainbow-colored sparks everywhere. The magnetic field caught it, but just barely. It settled onto the deck with a sound like wind chimes in an earthquake. I can't believe that worked, I muttered, cycling the atmosphere back into the bay. Control, ship is secured, probably, mostly. As soon as the pressure normalized, I approached the vessel. Up close, it was even stranger. The crystal surface seemed to pulse with internal light, creating patterns that made my eyes water. There didn't seem to be any obvious way in until a section of the crystal simply dissolved, revealing an opening. The interior looked like someone had given a geometry genius an unlimited budget and told them to go nuts. Everything was angles and fractals, but somehow organic at the same time. That's when I saw her. She was humanoid, thank whatever gods watch over maintenance workers, but that's where the similarities to humans ended. Her skin had a slight, crystalline quality, like frosted glass with hints of purple underneath. Instead of hair, she had what looked like delicate crystal filaments that caught the light and scattered it in mesmerizing patterns. But what really caught my attention were her eyes. They were like looking into miniature galaxies. She was also bleeding something that looked like liquid amethyst from a nasty gash across her shoulder. "Hey there," I said softly, holding up my empty hands. "Don't suppose you speak English?" She responded with a series of musical tones that somehow managed to sound both afraid and hopeful at the same time. A holographic display sparked to life between us, showing incomprehensible symbols that danced and shifted. "Right, language barrier, wonderful," I pointed to myself. "Zack," then gestured to her. "You are..." She made a sound like crystal wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I was pretty sure I'd dislocate my tongue trying to pronounce that. "Mind if I call you Crystal, at least until we figure out proper introductions?" Another series of musical notes, this time accompanied by what might have been a smile. Hard to tell with alien facial features, but the crystals in her skin definitely brightened. I pulled out my first aid kit, never leave your quarters without one when you work maintenance, and held up a bandage. "You're hurt. Let me help." She stared at the bandage, then at me, then back at the bandage. Finally she nodded, a surprisingly human gesture. As I moved closer, I noticed more details about her appearance. What I'd thought were simple crystal growths were actually intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change with her breathing. Her fingers had an extra joint, and there were delicate crystalline structures at her wrists that hummed faintly. "So," I said as I worked on her injury, trying to keep my voice casual, "want to tell me who shot up your ship? You know, in case they come looking for a rematch?" The look she gave me needed no translation. It clearly said, "You have no idea what you're getting into." "Story of my life, really, then?" I'd barely finished patching her up when the station's proximity alarms started wailing. Through the cargo bay viewport, 3 ships materialized out of nowhere. They looked like Crystal's ship's angry, edgy cousins, all sharp angles and threatening spikes. "Friends of yours?" I asked, already knowing the answer from the way Crystal's skin had gone from purple to nearly white. She made a sound like breaking glass and grabbed my arm. Her holographic display flared to life, showing what looked like heavily armed figures advancing through corridors. Well, that was pretty clear even without translation. "Control, we've got company," I called into my comm. Static was my only answer. "Perfect. They're jamming us." Crystal was trying to stand, but her injury made her stumble. The liquid amethyst blood had already soaked through the bandage. Those crystal hunter guys had done a number on her. Now, I'm not what you'd call a hero. My idea of bravery is fixing the station's septic system without a full hazmat suit. But watching this alien girl trying to face down her pursuers while barely able to stand, something in me just snapped. "Right," I said, helping her up. "Time for the grand tour of Delta 9's maintenance tunnels. Trust me, if there's one thing I know, it's how to disappear in this station." I led her to a maintenance hatch that even most of the station crew didn't know about. One of the perks of being the guy who fixes everything, you learn all the hiding spots. Crystal caught on quick, moving as silently as possible despite her injury. "The whole station's basically held together by duct tape and prayer," I whispered as we crawled through a particularly tight section. "These tunnels run everywhere. Even got my own shortcuts marked." She touched one of my graffiti-style direction markers, and her display showed what looked like a question mark. "Yeah, management would kill me if they knew I'd been tagging the tunnels, but you try remembering which identical grey tube leads where after a 12-hour shift." We kept moving, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. Crystal's crystalline features cast strange, beautiful patterns on the tunnel walls as we moved. She'd stop occasionally to trace symbols in the dust, teaching me basic concepts: danger, safe, friend, hide. It wasn't exactly riveting conversation, but it was a start. You know, I said, checking another junction, most people bring chocolate or flowers when they want to make friends. You brought armed crystal commandos. Points for originality. No! She made a sound that might have been a laugh, like wind through crystal caves. Her display showed an image of what seemed to be me, but with exaggerated features making an equally exaggerated, shocked face. Was she making fun of me? Oh great, now you're developing a sense of humor, just what I need, a sarcastic alien. The moment of levity was shattered by the sound of cutting tools above us. They were trying to brute force their way through the station's infrastructure. Amateur hour. They clearly don't know Rule 1 of space stations, I muttered, leading Crystal down another tunnel. She tilted her head questioningly. Don't cut holes in things unless you want a really exciting way to test the emergency force fields. I grinned. Want to see something fun? I led her to a maintenance panel and started rerouting power. Crystal watched intently, her galaxy eyes tracking every movement of my hands. The crystal filaments on her head shifted color slightly. Was that their version of raised eyebrows? See, they're using thermal cutters, real nasty tools. But this station's got about 50 different safety systems, and I know how to... I twisted 2 wires together. Redirect them. A series of satisfying clangs echoed through the tunnels, followed by some very alien-sounding cursing. Emergency containment fields, I explained proudly. They just trap themselves between bulkheads. That should keep them busy for a while. Crystal's display showed a series of rapid calculations, then an image of stick figures running into walls. She was definitely laughing now. You're catching on quick, though I have to say, this is not how I expected to make first contact. I always figured it would involve more formal diplomacy and less crawling through service ducts. Her expression suddenly turned serious. The display showed images of massive ships, planetary systems, and what looked like some kind of royal court. Well, that explained a few things. You're someone important, aren't you? And these guys really want to make sure you don't get where you're going. The look she gave me was answer enough. Somewhere above us, metal groaned as the crystal hunters started trying to force their way through another section. Good thing they don't know what they're dealing with, I said, pulling up a mental map of the station. They've got fancy weapons and advanced tech, but me, I've got 3 years of experience keeping this pile of junk running with bubblegum and paper clips. Let's see who wins. Turns out the crystal hunters had more patience than I'd given them credit for. They stopped trying to cut through walls and went quiet. Too quiet. I don't like this, I whispered, checking my datapad. The station's sensors were still scrambled, but I could detect power fluctuations. They're up to something. Crystal's display showed a warning symbol I was getting too familiar with. Danger. Her crystalline features had taken on a sharp, alert quality that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That's when the maintenance tunnel's temperature dropped about 20 degrees in 2 seconds flat. They're venting atmosphere in sections, I realized, trying to force us out, clever bastards. We had 2 options, stay put and freeze, or move into their trap. Some choice. Crystal seemed to understand our predicament. Her display showed a tactical overlay of the station's layout. She'd been paying attention to our route. Maintenance Bay 12, I said, pointing to a large chamber ahead. It's got independent life support and thick walls. We might be able to... The ceiling exploded. 3 crystal hunters dropped into the tunnel, their armor making them look like walking geometric nightmares. Their weapons hummed with an energy that made my teeth ache. Crystal pushed me aside just as the first shot turned the wall behind me into modern art. You know, I shouted, pulling Crystal behind a power junction. Most guests usually just say thank you and leave. Another shot sizzled past my ear. These guys need to work on their social skills. Crystal's response was to grab a piece of loose conduit and throw it with surprising accuracy. It connected with one hunter's helmet, creating a beautiful resonance that had him stumbling. The sound of crystal-on-crystal combat was like a wind chime in a blender. I wasn't about to let her have all the fun. Maintenance work teaches you a lot about improvised weapons, and I had home field advantage. I yanked a coolant line free and aimed it at the nearest hunter. Supercooled gas hit his armor, making it crack and splinter. Temperature differential, I grinned, gets them every time. But we were still outnumbered and outgunned. Crystal was doing something impressive with her own crystalline abilities, creating shields that deflected some of their shots, but each impact weakened her. The wound in her shoulder had reopened, liquid amethyst dripping onto the deck. They had us cornered in Maintenance Bay 12. The room was full of spare parts and tools, normally my kind of place, but right now it felt like a tomb. Crystal's displays were showing increasingly desperate tactical projections. None of them ended well. That's when I saw it, the plasma containment unit used for reactor maintenance. It was basically a controlled bomb, waiting to happen, or in this case, an uncontrolled one. Crystal, I said, catching her attention, remember what I said about Rule 1? Her eyes widened as she followed my gaze. The displays went crazy with warning symbols. Yeah, I know, terrible idea, but I'm full of those. I started inputting override codes. When I say run, head for junction 34C. It's got a backup life support seal. She grabbed my arm, shaking her head. The display showed us both escaping. Not happening, Sunshine. Someone's got to make sure this thing blows properly, or it'll take out half the station. I managed a grin. Besides, this is what I do. Fix problems with questionable solutions. The hunters were advancing, their weapons powering up for what looked like a final assault. Crystal's shield was failing, fractures spreading across its surface. Run! I slammed the overload sequence and shoved her toward the exit. The hunters, finally realizing what I was doing, shifted their fire toward the containment unit. Too late. The explosion was beautiful in a terrifying sort of way. A wave of superheated plasma turned the air itself into fire. I dove behind a maintenance crawler, but I wasn't quite fast enough. The right side of my body felt like it was being dipped in molten metal. The blast took out most of Maintenance Bay 12 and all 3 hunters. Emergency force fields snapped into place, preventing the damage from spreading. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Crystal's musical cry of alarm. I'm fine, I tried to say, but speaking hurt. Everything hurt. Well, mostly fine. Nothing a bit of maintenance work won't fix. She knelt beside me, her galaxy eyes wide with concern. The crystal filaments in her hair were oscillating wildly, casting frantic patterns on the walls. Her displays showed medical diagrams that looked pretty bad, even if I couldn't understand them. Hey, I managed, at least we redecorated the bay. Management's been wanting to update the look anyway. Crystal made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh, hard to tell through the pain. Her hands moved over my injuries, and I felt a cool sensation spreading from where she touched. The crystal structures at her wrists were pulsing with energy. That's new, I mumbled, watching as crystalline patterns spread across my burns. Hope you know what you're doing. The last thing I saw before passing out was Crystal's determined face, her features set in concentration as she worked. The crystal patterns on my skin caught the emergency lights, creating a light show that would have been pretty if it wasn't on my own body. Consciousness faded, and I had one last coherent thought. Maintenance reports were going to be a real pain to file after this. I woke up to the familiar antiseptic smell of the medical bay and the less familiar sensation of my skin, trying to throw a rave party. Beneath the standard medical bandages, patterns of crystalline light pulsed in time with my heartbeat. Worker Thorne, Dr. Rodriguez said, checking my vitals, you've managed to surprise even me. Those crystal formations saved your life. They're actually rebuilding damaged tissue. She paused. Your new friend hasn't left your side for 3 days. Crystal sat in a chair nearby, her galaxy eyes fixed on a datapad she was rapidly filling with symbols and diagrams. When she noticed I was awake, the crystal filaments in her hair lit up like a Christmas tree. 3 days? My voice sounded like I'd been gargling gravel. Please tell me someone fed my cactus. Crystal's display sprang to life, showing an image of Supervisor Chen caring for the small plant in my quarters. Then it shifted to show medical readouts, my vitals, tissue regeneration rates, and what looked like a detailed analysis of the crystal formations now embedded in my skin. She's been teaching us about her medical technology, Rodriguez explained. It's fascinating stuff. The crystals respond to both conscious and unconscious biological signals. They're like a second nervous system. Great, I croaked. I'm part disco ball now. Crystal made that wind chime laugh I was getting used to. Her display showed a succession of images, me fixing various station systems, then her own people doing similar work with crystal technology. She pointed to her wrist formations, then to my new crystal patches. You're saying we're both maintenance workers, just with different tools? She nodded enthusiastically. More images appeared, her people's ships, stations, cities, all grown from living crystal. Engineers and technicians shaped and maintained them through some kind of resonant energy I barely understood. Maintenance is maintenance, I grinned, no matter what galaxy you're from. Over the next few days, as I recovered, we developed our own communication system. Crystal taught me to recognize different tones in her crystalline language, while I helped her understand human gestures and expressions. The crystal patches on my skin sometimes resonated with her speech, creating harmonies that carried meaning beyond words. "You should see the scientists," Rodriguez told me during a checkup. "They're going crazy trying to understand how you two communicate. Half the xenolinguistics team has requested transfers to Delta 9. Crystal had brought pieces of her ship's crystal matrix to my bedside. She showed me how to feel the energy flows, how to recognize patterns in the resonance. In return, I taught her human maintenance shortcuts, the universal constants of duct tape, percussive maintenance, and the sacred art of knowing when to kick something." "You're telling me," I said one evening, watching her repair a broken medical scanner with a combination of crystal tech and good old-fashioned elbow grease, "that your people grow their technology like gardens." Her display showed vast crystal forests reaching toward alien skies. Each crystal was a computer, a power source, a building block of their civilization. The crystal formations in my skin glowed in response to the images, creating echoes of colors across the medical bay walls. And here we are, still trying to figure out if we should turn things off and on again. I flexed my right hand, watching crystal patterns shift beneath the skin. "Though I have to admit, your way has style." She touched one of the larger crystal patches on my arm, her expression serious. The display showed the moment she'd started the healing process, then layers of technical data I couldn't begin to understand. "Hey," I said softly, recognizing her concern. "No regrets here. These are the coolest scars anyone in maintenance has ever had. Plus, they're better than any comm unit for calling for backup." Crystal's next series of displays changed everything. They showed vast crystal cities, a grand palace that seemed to grow straight from the planet's core, and her, standing before what could only be a throne. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, sitting up straighter in my hospital bed. "You're not just important, you're their princess." The display showed more: political intrigue, rival factions, a coup attempt. The Crystal Hunters had been part of a group trying to prevent her from reaching a crucial diplomatic summit. Turned out, she was the leading voice for opening relations with other species, particularly humans. "So that's why you know so much about maintenance," I realized. "You've been studying us, preparing for contact." She nodded, her crystal filaments dimming slightly, embarrassment I'd learned. The next images showed her sneaking away from royal duties to work with her people's engineering corps, learning their crystal technology from the ground up, a princess who preferred engine rooms to throne rooms. Let me guess, the traditionalists weren't too happy about that, or about your plans for interspecies diplomacy. The display shifted to show political meetings erupting into violence. The Crystal Hunters had been sent to make sure she never reached the human diplomatic corps. Instead, she'd found a human maintenance worker who'd nearly gotten himself killed protecting her. "Well," I chuckled, watching the crystal patterns ripple across my arm, "I'd say we've got proof that humans and your people can work together, even if it's not quite the formal first contact you planned." Crystal's response was to create a harmonic resonance with the crystals in my skin, sending waves of what felt like gratitude and something deeper. The display showed us working together in the maintenance tunnels, fighting the hunters, her healing me, a series of moments where species differences meant nothing compared to trust and cooperation. "You know what this means, though?" I grinned. "I technically committed an interplanetary incident. Supervisor Chen is going to have a field day with the paperwork." Her crystalline laugh echoed through the medical bay. The display showed an official diplomatic seal, then an image of me with an outrageously elaborate crystal medal edited onto my chest. "Oh no, no fancy ceremonies," I protested. "I just did what any maintenance worker would do, fixed the problem in front of me, even if the problem was keeping a crystal princess alive long enough to revolutionize interspecies relations." Crystal's expression turned serious. The next images showed her people's ships, properly authorized this time, preparing to arrive at Delta 9. There would be formal meetings, official first contact protocols, treaties to negotiate. "No, they're not going to make me wear a uniform, are they?" I asked, only half joking. "Because I draw the line at dress shoes. A man's got to have standards. She reached out and took my hand, her crystal structures harmonizing with mine. The display showed us standing together, her in formal royal regalia, me in my maintenance coveralls. As representatives of our peoples met behind us, a bridge between worlds built from spare parts and emergency repairs. You realize, I said softly, this changes everything. Humans and your people working together, combining our technologies, our knowledge. The look she gave me needed no translation or display. It clearly said, that was the plan all along. The arrival of the crystal ships a week later made my little cargo bay incident look like a kid's light show. They emerged from what looked like tears in space itself, their crystalline forms refracting starlight in ways that had our scientists weeping with joy. Now that, I said from my observation spot in the medical bay, is how you make an entrance. The peacekeepers who came aboard made the hunters look like discount knockoffs. Their crystal armor sang with power, creating harmonies that resonated with my new additions. Crystal stood beside my bed, every inch the royal figure now, but she still wore the maintenance tech crystal formations at her wrists with pride. The station erupted into a flurry of diplomatic activity. Officials from Earth were scrambling to reach Delta 9, probably setting new speed records in the process. I watched it all from my recovery room, making bets with Crystal about how many diplomats would trip over their own feet, trying to make a good first impression. Worker Thorne, the head of the Crystal delegation, addressed me formally. You shielded our princess at great personal risk. Such bravery must be recognized. Just doing my job, I replied. Maintenance includes preventive care against assassination attempts now. I'm thinking of adding it to the employee handbook. Crystal's musical laughter cut through the formal atmosphere. She stepped forward holding something that looked like a living crystal flower. As she placed it on my bedside table, it resonated with the crystal patches across my skin, creating a light show that danced across the ceiling. That's not going in my maintenance report, I muttered, but I was grinning. The crystal formations had become permanent, the doctors confirmed. They'd continue to grow with my natural tissue, a lasting bridge between human and crystal technology. I'd probably never need a flashlight again, which would save the maintenance budget a few credits. As the diplomats argued over treaties and trade agreements, Crystal and I worked on something more practical. We combined human and crystal tech in the maintenance systems, teaching both sides how to work together. Turned out, a little crystal resonance did wonders for stubborn machinery, and good old human ingenuity helped stabilize crystal growth patterns. You know what this means? I asked her one day as we watched a crystal-human hybrid repair bot fix a hull breach in record time. Maintenance workers are going to be the most important people in interstellar relations. Her display showed an image of maintenance crews from both species working together across the galaxy, with a very unsubtle crown floating above them. All right, Your Highness, I laughed, the crystal scars on my arm harmonizing with her amusement. But I'm still not wearing a uniform. The final treaties established Delta 9 as the first joint human crystal space station. More would follow, they said, but this one, this slightly broken, constantly needs maintenance chunk of metal and crystal, would always be special. It's where it all started after all. Could have been worse, I told Crystal as we watched the ships depart, their crystal forms cutting prismatic paths through space. You could have crashed into the hydroponics bay instead of my cargo bay. Then we'd have had to explain to Lieutenant Morris why his contraband earth plants got crushed by a royal spaceship. She created a harmony that made all the crystal tech in the room resonate with laughter. The scars on my arm lit up in response, a permanent reminder that sometimes the best diplomatic relations start with a maintenance worker doing something stupid for the right reasons. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.